Now let's move to critic. In evaluating various approaches to cohesion, especially that of Halliday and Hazen on 1976, some have critiqued the place assigned to it within overall coherence. It is true that, as already suggested earlier in this chapter, at times Halliday and Hazen seem to be inconsistent in writing about the relationship between cohesion, texture, and coherence. In places, they identify cohesion with involving also features such as a register, propositional relations, and thematic development. At the beginning of Halliday and Hazen, they stated an example. The concept of texture is entirely appropriate to express the property of being a text. A text has a texture, and it is what distinguishes it from being something that is not a text. It derives the texture from the fact that it functions as a unity with respect to its environment. Then a little later, they state that cohesive ties between sentences stand out more clearly too because they are the only source of texture. But then on page 23, they claim that texture is more than just cohesion, also including register, and that neither is sufficient without the other. Again, in the concluding sections of the book, they claim that in addition to cohesion, texture involves both how the sentences of a text are structured in such a way as to relate the context, thematic development, and macrostructures what establishes a text as one of a particular kind, such as conversation or narrative. The following is the quotation from Halliday and Hazen. Texture involves much more than merely cohesion. In the construction of a text, the establishment of cohesive relations is a necessary component, but it is not the whole story. In the most general terms, there are two other components of texture. One is the textual structure that is internal to the sentence, the organization of the sentence and its part in a way which relates to its environment. The other is the macrostructures of the text that establishes it as text of a particular kind, such as conversation, narrative, lyric, commercial correspondence, and so on. Those linguists who have strongly critiqued Halliday and Hazen, for example Brown and ELEC, may thus have overlooked the ambiguity we have just noted in their target, preferring to find in Halliday and Hazen a stronger claim for cohesion that was perhaps intended. Nevertheless, there is certainly ambiguity. Application to pedagogy. The case for cohesion. Cohesion is fundamental to text construction, but is neglected in many learning materials, preference being given to grammar and lexis, although not lexical cohesion. So what is the case for a focus on cohesion? Most obviously, there are formal differences between how cohesion is signaled or realized in different languages. Reference, substitution, ellipses, conjunction, and lexical cohesion differ in this respect and therefore obviously need to be the focus of teaching and learning. On another level, though the functional one, there is another reason for there to be a need for cohesion to be in the language syllabus. If we take as an example a language which is typologically distant from English, say Chinese, we can see how this operates in terms of function. Chinese is often referred to as a higher context language. That is, it relies greatly in context in text language. It tends to signal meaning explicitly through the linguistic system rather than relying so much on the context, although context is still vital. What this means with regard to cohesion is determined by the context in Chinese. In English, for example, after a participant has been introduced into the discourse, it will be typically reiterated in subsequent clauses by means of cohesive devices such as pronouns. In Chinese, however, in contrast to English, after the introduction of a participant into the discourse, this participant is generally understood from the context and does not need to be reiterated by means of cohesive devices. Similar differences in cohesion between English and Chinese are to be found in other areas of discourse. Although because of its typological distance from English, Chinese is a good example to talk about functional differences in cohesion. Differences in cohesive functions also occur in languages which are typologically closer. If we take Spanish, which is so much closer to English, as another example, that language in common with Chinese also does not need to reiterate participants in a text in the way that English does. However, there is less reliance on context in Spanish than in Chinese, because the verb itself will be marked to indicate who or what is being referred to. That is to say, cohesion will be signaled through the form of the verb. But nevertheless, in Spanish, as in Chinese, there is no need to use pronouns to signal continuity in the text. Ties, chains, and bonds. Some aspects of cohesion have traditionally been featured in language teaching. For example, substitution and ellipses, even if they have not been dealt with under that rubric but treated as aspects of grammar. A lot of those teaching and learning materials which do deal with cohesion focus on connecting pairs of sentences using a slat and a filler or fill in the blanks. Approach reference items can be practiced in this way, and this can be a useful exercise in raising learners' awareness of the forms and the functions of reference in English, which will both likely differ from their first language. However, although the cohesive tie thinking to clauses is the fundamental unit in cohesion, attention needs also to be focused on the rule of chains and bands. Cohesion varies from register to register. An understanding of such a variation is not likely to be developed through practice in linking pairs of clauses. Hatch uses the following text to highlight the subtitles needed to deal with what might be seen even quite simple identity chains, although Hatch does not use this term. Is it indicates that each of the blanks in this text should be replaced by a simple she or her. At some points, it would seem appropriate to reintroduce either the full or a partial name. Such reintroductions might be because the name has not been mentioned for a while and listeners needs to be reminded of it, or because other characters have been mentioned since the name was last used, and there may hence to possible confusion. Is there a need to put the emphasis on the person being introduced rather than her accomplishments? Hatch raises all these possibilities, and they all might feed into a consciousness raising discussion of the structures and functions of different chains in this course. Similar interrogates are likely to be at stake with similarity chains. To be exemplify this issue with regard to second language usage, the following text was written by a Hong Kong secondary school student. Here's the example. Playing computer games has become such a popular hobby that many teenagers spend a lot of time and effort in the virtual world. Some people think that playing computer games is a harmful hobby which wastes time and money, while others believe that it can be a serious activity that requires practice and may turn into a career. So I strongly believe that playing computer games is a harmful hobby. So it is easy to get addicted to computer games, as we know that computer games are attractive and takes quite a long period of time to win the games. After you have won the first round, you may want to continue playing because you are attracted by the game. As the result, it is easy to get addicted. So 3, it may lead to eye strain and other health problems. We all know that playing computer games for too many hours will make our eyes feel tired or dry, and it would lead to eye strain. Also will cause mental problems, as it may affect their feeling or attitude. It may make them feel angry or sad or carry away, and may occur accidents. It is quite dangerous for the people who cannot control him or her emotion, because you don't know when she or he lost the game what will happen next. Next, let's move to lexes. This brings us to the role of lexes. Students need to be made aware of lexical fields and lexical sets to build up the various semantic relations involved in lexical cohesion. As a whole, argues students need to learn how to repeat, but not just by repeating with the same word or phrase. Although in some registers, such as scientific ones, this may be more preferred, but to master the full range of words from the relevant semantic field, as McCarthy argues with regard to conversion. The way in which we can observe speakers moving from subordinates to hyphonyms and from synonyms to antonyms and back again is a common feature of conversation, and learners can be equipped to use these skills by regular practice. McCarthy is concerned with the conversation, but the same applies wherever the register. Now, let's move to propositional relations. Crombie on 1985 proposes using propositional relations as an organizing principles for syllabus design. She argues that propositional relations are a universal phenomenon common to all languages. She argues that propositional relations can provide a framework for introducing the signaling items of the target language, and also how the relations may be expressed by the other means referred to as unsignaled value assignments.